Hi Warriors, Unit 9, Lesson 2. This lesson is about anxiety disorders. Before we begin on new material, let's cover what the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is and why it's important. Well, it's important because it's a starting point for your therapist, your counselor, somebody to look up symptoms of mental disorders and be able to plug them in and find out, oh, okay, since you display these symptoms of restlessness, irritability, and unable to relax, you may have generalized anxiety disorder. So a starting point. It is the place where a counselor is going to go to try to figure out what exactly is the issue. And then we can decide, depending on our perspective, the doctor's perspective, how you're going to treat that disorder. We'll talk a little bit about that in the rest of this PowerPoint. In this PowerPoint, we'll learn about anxiety disorders. We're going to distinguish between normal anxiety and abnormal anxiety, because after all, we all have anxiety. Describe generalized anxiety disorder and compare and contrast specific anxiety disorders. So when we're mentioning anxiety, we're talking about a state of uneasiness that occurs in response to a vague or imagined danger. The vague or imagined danger is the important part there, because remember that when the autonomic nervous system, the stress response system is triggered, it's that feeling of anxiousness. It's the alarm stage of GAS. So the vague or imagined danger is what can trigger that. And if we are forever in a state of anxiety, we are constantly like on edge and ready to fight or flight. So that's why anxiety disorders can be tricky, and many people suffer from them, which this next video is going to show you, but we'll save that for class. Not the video. Phobic disorders are included in anxiety, panic, GAD, OCD, and stress disorders. Now, new development in psychology in the DSM-5 has differentiated OCD from traumatic stress disorders. This is a new development, so it's not a big deal if we don't remember that. Like I said, there's that video, but let's talk about phobias first off. So a phobia is the excessive or irrational fear out of proportion to the actual danger. A phobia is different from ordinary fear because ordinary fear doesn't prevent us from living our own lives. But remember the 3 Ds in relationship with phobias and anxiety. So if it is deviant, distressful, and dysfunctional, then it is probably a phobia. If the fear is so drastic that I can't go to the haunted trail because there's going to be clowns there, then that's a phobia. If you're avoiding things because of this irrational fear, that's a phobia. If you're willing to get on the fury, but you feel like you have a slight fear of heights, not a phobia, it's just a fear. The ordinary person is not even going to step foot, or the person with phobia is not even going to step foot at Carowinds. So there's the difference. When it comes to phobias, we've got lots of strange and different sorts of phobias. So to be claustrophobic is to fear enclosed places. Acrophobia, and you already have the answers to these in your notes, so I can't like quiz you on it, but acrophobia is the fear of heights. Arachnophobia is our fear of spiders. Zoophobia is the fear of animals. Moving on, we've got bibliophobia, which would be awful. Fear of books. Coulrophobia is the fear of clowns, which, you know, I hear a lot of people say they have that. Cyclophobia is fear of bicycles, awful too. Ergophobia, fear of work. Glossophobia, fear of speaking in public, just to name a few phobias. So that was a pretty extensive list of phobias. Okay, so anxiety disorders include phobias. They also include panic disorders and agoraphobia. So agoraphobia includes the fear of crowded or public places. When we are out in the open, agoraphobia, going back to the fear, you might have a panic attack just because you're out in the open in like a concert. Not going to be a good place for a person with agoraphobia. Walking across a large campus, not good for agoraphobia. You guys have to park out in that parking lot. Like that's a good example of a public place. Or you might have a panic attack. But let's talk about a panic attack. So panic disorder and panic attacks are a period of intense fear. And they say that panic attacks can feel like heart attacks. I've never had one myself, but I've had to talk people out of panic attacks before. When I've been coaching, I've had two students, two softball players that had panic attacks on the field. And because of the topics that I teach here, I know what to do, but they had these things, definitely shortness of breath, dizziness, rapid heart rate, shaking, sweating, choking, nausea, all of those things these girls suffered from in that moment. Now it's temporary. It goes away in just a few moments, just as quickly as a panic attack may begin. But to the person who's having it, it's one of those irrational fears. You can't get talked out of it. Often I've had them hyperventilating, and you have to just kind of snap them out of it. So panic disorder and agoraphobia are related. Generalized anxiety disorder is the one that most people suffer from. Millions of Americans suffer from anxiety disorder, GAD. And this is excessive or unrealistic worry about life circumstances that lasts for at least 6 months. And things that we have anxiety over include finances, work, personal problems, accidents, and dating. I used to have anxiety so badly that I couldn't sleep at night. And so I got medication so that I could sleep at night. And then I realized that it was kind of all a vicious circle. And that's when I started, consequently, when I started running, because I discovered that this was definitely something that I could manage. Excessive or unrealistic worry is that vague or generalized fear of imagined danger. It's that fight or flight, being in that first stage of fight or flight constantly. So when you're constantly feeling the edginess, the alertness, and there's no downtime, you're in trouble. OCD is its own type of anxiety disorder too. So obsessive compulsive disorder, individuals unable to stop thinking of the same thoughts or performing the same tasks. Let me simplify that definition for you a little bit, because I like to take it into. So obsessed, you are obsessively thinking about something. Maybe it's the safety and welfare of your family. And because you can't do anything about the safety and welfare of your family, you are compelled to call them 15 times a day. So the obsession is managed through a compulsion. I'm obsessed with the fact that I may have germs crawling on my hands. I am compelled to wash my hands many times a day. I'm obsessed with the fact that somebody could get in my back door, so I am compelled to make sure it's locked, and I do it several times in order to ease my mind and that I can realize that I've done it effectively. So OCD, to have people throw this term around a lot, and by the way, it's not cool to joke about any of these things, but my desk's a mess. I'm so OCD. I keep my car so clean and neat. I'm OCD. No. If you are OCD, again, remember the deviant, distressful, and dysfunctional. Typically, people with OCD know that they have it, and they are distressed by the dysfunction, because think about it. It's going to take a long time to get your clothes just right, to change your clothes, to tie your shoes just right. That's sometimes some people's compulsions, is to make sure everything is properly tied, properly fitting. Your food, that takes forever. Your food can't touch. There's a lot of things that go into it, and that it would be clear to the person who has it that this is not a normally functioning process. Okay. Add to that the stress disorders, physical and mental strain caused by a traumatic event. We'll learn more about that in this video in class. And post-traumatic stress disorder is when we suffer from intense fear, avoidance of stimuli, flashbacks from past traumatic events. The PTSD and those that suffer from it sometimes cannot get past the event that caused the trauma, and so they fixate those thoughts on it. It's like those obsessive thoughts. I should have done this differently, maybe I should have done that, this, that, the other. Flashbacks, those soldiers who have been in war may get triggered by fireworks. We always see warnings around July 4th about being respectful. Sexual abuse, child abuse, physical abuse, any abuse could be a traumatic event. But you don't necessarily have to be the one that got the traumatic event upon you. You can witness a traumatic event and suffer from PTSD. That makes me think of what just happened at this Travis Scott concert. That's a traumatic event for sure. So the people that were in that crowd, maybe the possibility they could develop agoraphobia. Symptoms include 6 or months after the traumatic event, lasting for years. Flashbacks, nightmares, numbness of feelings, tension, and irritability. You know, I don't normally endorse movies for this one, but that one movie with Chris Kyle, the sniper, American Sniper, with Bradley Cooper, I think is a pretty accurate portrayal of somebody who has may suffer from PTSD. Acute anxiety disorder, similar to PTSD. And then how are we going to treat these things? So causes of anxiety disorders. We have not talked about perspectives in a very long time. It's been since unit 1 or 2, I don't know. So I'm going to need to, in class, review with you what these psychodynamic, what these perspectives were. You might remember that Sigmund Freud was a psychoanalyst, and he's responsible for the psychodynamic theory. Freud believed that an anxiety disorder, well, psychodynamic theorists believe that an anxiety disorder is our repressed urges that surface abnormally as obsessions and compulsions. Doesn't hold any water today because of the repression thing. Learning theorists, now you'll recall that learning theorists include guys like Piaget, Bandura. Phobias are learned in childhood through association and learned by watching parents get scared. So maybe social learning or conditioning is how we learn phobias. If that's the case, then they can be unlearned. So we can unlearn to be afraid of something. The cognitive perspective, remember, how do we think about these things? That people feel helpless to control situations, which creates anxiety. We talked a little bit about that in Unit 8. And then the biological view is that twins studies show 45% chance of anxiety in both twins. Now, combination of cognitive view and biological view is that panic disorder may be biologically prone to overact with panic. After first panic, fear of another panic takes over. So we reflect on those things that cause the panic attack. And, now since you know it's there, you kind of fear that next thing. Okay, that's a really quick overview of anxiety disorders, which includes phobias, panic, OCD, PTSD, and stress disorders. So we'll review that in class and talk more about those. We'll watch those videos.